Hello gamers, it is Trav again with Handheld Horizon, and today I'm going to be reviewing a very interesting handheld gaming PC, the GPD Win MAX 2. Now, honestly, this is a review I've been kind of dragging my feet on because I'm having a tough time understanding exactly what this device is and what it's trying to do. But here's the deal, I actually really like the Win MAX 2 in theory. And I think once I fully grasped the idea of what GPD was trying to accomplish with this device, I gained a whole new appreciation for it. So anyways, that means we have a lot to dig into. Let's get into it. So many of you might be asking, what is the Win MAX 2? And I think the best way to describe it is that it's a laptop with a gamepad built in. So ideally you get the best of both worlds, a portable gaming machine as well as a portable productivity machine when you want to get some work done. And I really like this idea. I do often find myself taking both my laptop and my Steam Deck in my backpack when I'm traveling. This device removes the need to take both in a small but powerful package. This is the higher end of what I would personally consider handheld, but it's actually not that big compared to something like the Lenovo Legion Go. And because it has a gamepad built in, I do consider it a handheld device, but just barely. What about you? Do you think this should be considered a handheld device? Leave a comment below with your thoughts. The version I have here is the Ryzen 5 7640U paired with the Radeon 760M graphics. This version of the Win MAX 2 will run you about $950 on Amazon right now. The upgraded version will add about $200 to $300 to that price. The upgraded version will also net you about 10 to 15% performance increase in most games. Now, I opted for this one because I tend to play lower end games on handheld devices anyway, so the 7640 and 760M are more than enough to play some good games, in my opinion. So let's talk a little bit about the hardware. The screen is 10.1 inches and it's also a touch screen as well, which is really nice. I really like the touch screen and I think it's actually really high quality here. I have no complaints with that at all. The CPU is the AMD Ryzen 5 7640U. This is the Zen 4 architecture running at up to 4.9 gigahertz, and the GPU is the AMD Radeon 760M RDNA 3 architecture, clock speeds up to 2.6 gigahertz. Stock, this thing will come with 16 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM running at 7500 megatransfers per second. The default storage on here is a 1 terabyte M2 2280, and that's pretty cool. I think 1 terabyte is kind of like the standard these days. Obviously, this does have Wi-Fi. An interesting tidbit is that this actually does have a 4G module that you can buy, and I don't know, I think it's kind of strange, but if you want to be doing some gaming on the go or maybe some work on the go, this is a really good option for that. It also does have a front webcam, which is pretty cool. If you need to jump on a call or anything like that, the webcam is super convenient. Keep in mind though, it is only 2 megapixels, so a pretty low quality camera. It also has Bluetooth, and then one of the standout features of this device, a 76 watt hour battery, which is going to give you quite a bit of gaming time. So let's look a little bit at the gamepad here. You have your 2 Switch style joysticks. You have your D-pad, which is mostly clicky. I think it's actually a really serviceable D-pad. You have this switch that turns the gamepad on and off, so you can go into like productivity mode, and now the controller is not going to work. Then you can go back into gaming mode, just that easy, and now the gamepad is going to work just fine. You have your select, menu, and start buttons. You also have a little touchpad here. Now keep in mind, the touchpad is actually above the keyboard, which is pretty interesting. I find this to actually be quite inconvenient in most cases because you're trying to hover your hand above the keyboard, which is not the best in my opinion, but I very rarely ever use this anyway, so it's more of just a nice to have. You have your select, menu, and start buttons, which are also very clicky. Here are your face buttons. I would say the face buttons are very similar to something like a PlayStation Vita. The same goes for the D-pad. Very reminiscent of the PS Vita, and I like the Vita a lot, so I think that's great. You have a pretty good sized keyboard here. I do have pretty big hands, like I've mentioned in the past, so the keyboard is just too small for me, but that's just me. Mileage may vary for you. Like I mentioned, you do have the webcam here. I'm going to close it up now and look at the I/O on this device. So you have your micro SD card slot as well as a regular SD card slot, which I found interesting. Nothing on the front other than the power button and some speaker holes on the front and left there. 2 USB-A ports. And then on the back, this is where things get interesting. We have the headphone jack. We have the Oculink port. You have your HDMI. And then you have 2 USB-Cs here, which are really nice. So it also comes with 2 of these little pads here that you can put on top of the controls. So you can hide that you're playing games on this if you're like taking this into a business meeting, which is kind of cool. I would never use these, but it's kind of cool. And they just slide right into the back here. So, find it, yep, right there. Just go in like that. So there's a nice handy spot for you to put them. Then on the back, you also have your triggers, your bumper buttons, which are nice. The triggers, I mean, honestly, if I had to say one thing that feels kind of cheap about this device, I would say it's probably the triggers. The triggers are great. Same thing on this side, L2, L1. Then you have your heat exhaust here, which does pretty good. This device does get pretty hot. Speaking of hot devices, I wanted to do a little size comparison here. So we're going to start with the Steam Deck OLED. You can see the Steam Deck OLED is wider, but not as tall as the Win MAX 2. And you can see that with my silicone case on here, it is about just as wide as the Win MAX 2. So the Win MAX 2 is not as big or chunky as you might originally expect. Here I'm comparing the Win MAX 2 to a Nintendo Switch. You can see that the Switch is considerably smaller, but it's about the same width. So the width is really not an issue on this device at all. Now we have the big boy, we have the Lenovo Legion Go. You can see that this whole device is about the size of the screen on the Lenovo Legion Go, which is pretty crazy. I think if anything, this just kind of shows you how big the Lenovo Legion Go is. Also, looking at the screen sizes here, you can see that they're almost the same. The Win MAX 2, the screen is about 1 inch bigger, but it's really hard to tell. When you get up to this size, it's really not that big of a difference. Now you will notice the screen size difference on the Steam Deck OLED, and then of course on the Nintendo Switch, the screen is going to be significantly smaller. But overall, the Win MAX 2 is not as big as you might think. So let's get into what matters the most to us, what games this can play. So because this is a Windows machine, the gaming possibilities are essentially endless. You can access all of the PC games that you would normally play on your gaming PC, and the Win MAX 2 also has the power to emulate all the way up to the Nintendo Switch. Pretty cool. When it comes to PC gaming, you can expect to play nearly everything out there, with graphical settings turned to mostly medium and low. I think the sweet spot for this device, for most big AAA games, is 1920 by 1200 with low to medium settings. This will net you anywhere from about 30 to 60 frames, depending on the game and power profile you are using. Speaking of power profiles, you have the ability to fully customize TDP on this device. If you want super quiet, low-powered play, you can set it to about 15 watts, and if you want to go full bore, go ahead and set that baby to a full 30 watt TDP and let those fans go crazy. I will point out though that the fans on this device are actually quite nice and really quiet even when running at a full 30 watt TDP. Speaking of TDP, let's look at Motion Assistant, the built-in TDP and device management software. Okay, so I wanted to show you a little bit of Motion Assistant here. Motion Assistant is the software that you will be using to set the device settings, and more importantly, during gameplay, you can set the TDP. Now you can see right up here we have the AC TDP as well as the DC TDP. DC being when you are running off the battery, AC being when you are plugged in to a power supply from the wall. So you can see here that I have 3 custom TDP set, custom 1, custom 2, and custom 3. I think this is a pretty good setup, 15, 20, and 30. I tend to run this thing around 15 or 20 watts. I think that's kind of the sweet spot for performance and battery life. You can also set up a bunch of different hotkeys to change things on the fly so you don't have to open this. So for example, for me, I have control and question mark set as the thing that opens motion assistant, and then I have the bumper plus, or I should say bumper up, the buttons that change the TDP. So check this out. I'll press the bumpers and then up, and you can see that I changed my TDP. I'll do it again. I'm on 20 and now I'm on 30. All right, so it's that easy. During a game, L1, R1, and up, and you can change your TDP, and you will see your frames rise as the TDP goes up. So this is pretty cool overall. Has a bunch of different tabs here for gyro input, your hotkeys, so you can set up your hotkeys however you want, the device, and so the most important thing I think here is the resolution. So this, like I mentioned before, this does have a 10-inch 1600p screen. However, I set mine to 1920 by 1200. I find that to be the sweet spot. And then you can also set your refresh rate. Mine is set to 60. I recommend that. 60 hertz is, what I would consider the minimum for PC gaming these days. The Win MAX 2 is a great mix between portability and power. This will fit into any backpack with no issues, and I am actually very happy with the power profile and performance. The controller and ergonomics are actually pretty good. They aren't as good as a dedicated controller, but they aren't as terrible as the shape of the device might indicate. The overall hardware is also very impressive. I can say that this device feels like a tank. It is quite heavy, but not too heavy, and the only thing that really feels cheap about it are the shoulder buttons, or I should say the triggers, the triggers on the device. I've been very impressed with the battery life as well. This is probably the biggest selling point for me. At that performance sweet spot that I mentioned earlier, the Win MAX 2 will get you about 2.5 to 5 hours playing some pretty heavy duty games, so I like that a lot. The screen is also great. The resolution of 1600p is admittedly overkill on a 10-inch screen, but nonetheless, it's super crisp. I think this device is perfect for slower paced games like turn-based RPGs or tactical games, maybe a little bit of story-based games, something like that. I did try to play some Doom 2016 on here, and I think it was totally passable, but honestly, I would prefer playing fast-paced games on a device not like this, something that has a dedicated controller. You can absolutely plug in a mouse and make the FPS experience much better, but then I kind of find that you're really leaning in and squinting pretty hard to get that traditional mouse and keyboard experience. The performance on this setup, which is the 7640U and the 760M, is actually very impressive. In my testing for most games, this performs slightly better than the Lenovo Legion Go, for example. You can absolutely play AAA games. For example, I've been playing Elden Ring on here a little bit, and it's a great experience. You're looking at around 50 frames, maybe in some areas 60 frames, and that's at 1200p medium settings. So let's talk about some things that could be better. While the resolution of the screen is great, I would have preferred 120 Hz instead of those extra overkill pixels at 1600p. Long story short, I would have preferred 1200p at 120 Hz instead of 1600p at 60 Hz. For me, the keyboard is too small. I would say in general, for someone with bigger hands, it's just not a great fit. But I very rarely used it because honestly, I just use this for gaming. I did try to do a couple productivity tasks on here, and to be honest, the keyboard just was a non-starter for me. A big one here, bigger is not always better. This is a 10-inch screen, which is the high end of the handheld market, but the issue here is that if you are holding it like it is designed to be held, you don't get the full benefit of the 10-inch screen because the screen is farther from you than on a typical handheld. I think the 8.8-inch screen on the Legion Go actually feels bigger when you are playing it because it's actually closer to your face. The built-in Performance Manager motion assistant is just okay and needs a makeover in my opinion. I mentioned before that it's a good mix of size and performance as well as portability and usability, but in reality I do tend to pull out my actual laptop when I want to get some work done, or my Legion Go or Steam Deck if I want to play some PC games on the go. For what it's trying to do, they did a very good job, but I think it's second best for work and play in most situations. However, I do think that this is a very good match, like I mentioned earlier, for slower paced RPGs. I think this is a good device for games like that. So overall, I recommend the Win MAX 2 for someone who does not have a laptop or handheld PC. If you are looking to get something that can be both, then this is a great purchase. If you already have a Steam Deck and a laptop though, I wouldn't super recommend this. Generally speaking, I think we can either go up or down in size. If we were to go up in size, I think you sacrifice portability and playability with a gamepad, essentially making this a traditional gaming laptop. Or you could go down in size, something like the Win Mini or Win 4. And after having used this device for about 2 months, I think going down in size is probably the better option. The gamepad on here is actually pretty dang good. I wish they wouldn't have used Switch joysticks, but I think they get the job done quite well regardless. So for $950, you get a good mix of gaming performance and portable productivity. Personally, if I didn't already have my laptop or my Steam Deck, I might just splurge for something like this. Make sure to check out the links below to grab your own on Amazon with easy returns and free 2-day shipping. As always, thank you so much for watching today. If you like the video or listen to this while doing something else entirely and have absolutely no intention of buying a device like this, hit that subscribe button anyway for more content just like this. If you have any questions, leave a comment below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much, and as always, gamers, have a good one.